Professor Nurit is in Portugal as keynote for the International Conference on Textbooks, National and Global Historical Perspectives, organized by the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. So thank you, Professor Nurit, for contributing for the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies newsletter. So I'll put you 4 questions in this interview, which intends to be brief and last up to 20 minutes overall. So first question, who are you, what do you do, and where?
Well, I'm a professor of language education and social semiotics, and I work at the David Yellin Academic College right now in Israel, in Jerusalem. The focus on my research is the discourse of education in Israel. Mm-hmm. So I studied different aspects of this discourse, starting from language development at school, written and spoken, classroom discourse, racism in class and in school books, scientific discourse and the teaching of scientific discourse. And my studies in the last 15 years or so has been on textbooks, the depiction of others in Israeli textbooks.
And how do you think your research is interdisciplinary from all these broad approaches you mentioned?
Yeah. Social semiotics is what it says. It's social and semiotics. Mm-hmm. So when we analyze texts or photographs or whatever signs human beings make, we ask social questions, and then we go to the semiotic analysis to find the answers. So we have to find through the semiotic analysis the rhetoric of whoever made a sign, their interest, their ideologies, their goals in a certain environment, a certain culture, a certain context at a certain moment. So it's all mixed up, the social and the semiotic.
So could you detail some of the subjects your research interacts with?
Yeah, first of all, critical discourse analysis, multimodal analysis, and then social semiotic is not a theory. You go to study something and you study it and then you make up the theory about this. So, for example, for my study of textbooks, I had to go to racism studies, post-colonial studies, historical studies, collective memory, literature, psychology, sociology, art, and multimodality. So all these things come together in the analysis.
Are there any perspectives on present and future that you would like to share with us in the context of your research? So perhaps from your latest books or from your forthcoming research?
Okay, my latest book is about the representation of Holocaust victims in Israeli schoolbooks and how this representation is connected to the representation of living others, such as Palestinians, Arab Jews, and Ethiopian Jews. Now, what I found out in this study is that the Holocaust victims are represented as the Jews we do not want to be again. And that makes their representation very disrespectful, traumatizing, horrendous, but it does not invite empathy. It does not invite mourning of their lives, because their lives are never told, only their death is told. Now, the Oriental Jews, or Arab Jews and Ethiopian Jews that were brought to Israel by the government for demographic reason, in order to increase the number of Jews and have a Jewish majority all the time, are not accepted by Israel. They are to be changed and molded. So, because Israeli society wants to appear as Western, so they have to be Westernized. And they also are depicted in a very disrespectful way as the people we don't want to be now. Okay? Mm-hmm. The Palestinians, the citizens of Israel, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, are depicted as the potential exterminators. After we have made peace with the Germans, we needed another potential exterminator, another eternal enemy, and the role was transferred to the Arabs. So they are depicted as a problem, a threat, an enemy from within, and so on. So you have all these groups of others that are depicted in such a terribly, again, disrespectful way that you ask yourself, who are the non-others? I mean, who are we? Yeah. And this, in spite of the fact that in Israel there's a huge project for many years now called The Other Is Me. When you come to a school, you see slogans like respect the other, love the different, but since all these groups of people are represented in such a horrible way, who are the others that are left to respect and love? So that's why I made this study that really connects the way Holocaust education is being implemented and the way and the attitude towards contemporary others. Mm-hmm. The last chapter of the book is a suggestion for another sort of curriculum. Mm-hmm. A sort of curriculum that will be more hybrid, written by the people themselves, not about them. A sort of curriculum where Holocaust remembrance is not traumatizing, but really inspires mourning and empathy with the lives that were lost. And a curriculum where every group in this country can write its own narrative, because what we have is only one narrative, the Zionist so-called Western narrative. We don't have the others. So if every group writes their own narrative, then we can maybe overcome all those gaps between because textbooks reflect society, and whatever you find in textbooks, you find in society. Yes. If you really want to educate towards multiculturalism and understanding and acceptance, not only tolerance, but real acceptance, then you have to give voice to everybody, to have their own voice, not try to civilize them your way, but really give them their own voice. I don't know if my suggestion will be accepted or not, probably not, but I think this is the only way.
Yes, and that's truly interdisciplinary because that touches all as a society.
It touches
individually
everybody.
And collectively, of
yes.
course.
Many cultures, many languages, many viewpoints, many ideologies, many histories, yes. And many geographies,
Yes.
We only learn about pogroms and wars and Holocaust and things like that. We don't really learn. In Israel, nobody learns the history of the place, yes. Of the land, as if the land never existed. And when you start studying the land, you find so many interesting things in agriculture, in economy, in commerce, in intercultural relationships that existed only 100 years ago.
Yes, I was thinking about textbooks because you're here on behalf of the conference on textbooks. But textbooks are a part of all this issue because the curriculum is very broad. But you're saying that they reflect society, but they also act as enablers of future citizens. So sure. They enable how people are raised and think about that.
Yes, one of the question that I had really when I started this is, as I said, a social question. and I will show it tomorrow, it's very harsh, but how do you take nice Jewish boys and girls and turn them into monstrous killers of children when they reach 18? It takes a very long, thorough, and sophisticated education to do that. And that was my question, you know. How do you do that?
Yeah.
How come, you know? And we have an organization called Breaking the Silence, where soldiers confess what they did in the West Bank. And many of these confessions, the soldiers say, I was educated to believe that whatever I do to the Palestinians will save us from another Holocaust. And only when I aimed my rifle at a little girl, I realized that I was the evil one. And then I stopped. So this education is so entrenched. It's really, you know, Richard Dawkins hated religion, and he called religion mind infection. But I think this is mind infection. Ideologies can be mind infected. And they are so infected with it that, and the dehumanization of Palestinians especially is so strong that it's very hard for people, especially young people, to get rid of that and to see these people as human beings at all ages. And I think Israeli education, unfortunately, is very successful. And we have to understand that education is so very important, not only for instructions, you know, but as the making of what we call our souls, our minds, and all those things we don't see, all right, but are there and direct our lives. I don't think people realize, because, for example, now in Israel there's a lot of, you know, discontent with the government and so on and so forth. So people started to look at textbooks and say, oh my God, this is what my children are learning. This is what my children are reading. Before, people wouldn't consider it very important. So, okay, they have to pass the exam. But because they have to pass the exam, they have to read all that and remember. Yes. And this is all they read and remember. You know, children don't go to the internet to verify their textbooks. They just have to study for the exam. And now people are starting to look at textbooks and they are appalled. And I think this is a good thing. It comes at bad times, but
yes.
It is
so ideology and potentially politics are deeply embedded in textbooks and education overall to enable that society and that way of thinking. Yes, very powerful.
Yes. Yeah. Professor Günter Kress, who died 2 years ago and was my great teacher and the greatest of, you know, social semiotics, said that every sign, and we can say that about textbooks, is, he called it a punctuation of semiosis, which means that every such book is like putting a full stop on a process of semiotization, on a process of meaning making. Yes. That's why, you know, in Israel, I don't know here, but in Israel, every time a government changes, they start fighting over the textbooks, especially history and civic studies. Exactly. And they put their own viewpoint. So this is what textbooks do. Yes. This is what textbooks do. Now, because in Israel, every textbook has lots of quotes from the Bible, they become sacred. You see what I mean? And they have so many tricks, really, to make them important and to make them really sacred. If you put, you know, phrases from the Bible, this is God's speech. Yes. And they really, you know, they took the place of the scriptures, especially in secular societies.
So they are acknowledged as the way history should be perceived, and they support that too.
Not only topically, but also discursively. You see, like, I don't know here, but in Israel, for example, there is no room to question anything in these books. And even if you have question as, what is in your opinion, they want the summary of the chapter. okay?
Yes.
You don't really have any possibility of critical thinking over these textbooks. And also there are a lot of assumptions that are, again, like holy, you know? For example, in a religious school, you wouldn't question the existence of God, right? In Israeli school books, you couldn't question the existence of Jewish natural historical right over the land. And this is exactly what you have to discuss, okay? So these are givens that nobody questions, that nobody can refute, or the fact that the whole world hates us and anti-Semitism rules the world and things like that, okay? And it's so strong. It's so very strong that we see the results in the behavior really of people, of soldiers, of politicians, of the society as a whole.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Nurit, for being with us for your conference at our on textbooks, national and global historic perspectives. And thank you for your contribution for our newsletter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.